Hi guys, hope you're all keeping safe and well. Continuing this informal series, Brown Car Guy and Buddies. Today, I'm really looking forward to talking to James Piecowye. I did the radio show with him for 6 years on Dubaieye. It was CarTalk every Monday night. And we are amazed at the response that we got with that show and how long it actually went on. I did that along with my buddy Imtishan from Motoring Middle East. I've done the chat with him as well. Look back through this feed. Anyway, James didn't do the car show. He did a show every night on the radio. And in fact, he's not just a radio DJ. He is in fact Professor James Piecowye. He's an academic and he teaches at university. So it's always fascinating as well as fun to speak to him. And I'm really looking forward to this. He does his own show, Podaholiks. I'll put all the links to his shows below. So he's going to be kind of leading this a little bit, but we'll see how it goes. And before I get into that, of course, make sure you're subscribing to this channel. Make sure you hit that bell notification icon and follow me on all social media channels. Just search for hashtag Brown Car Guy. That's on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And whilst you're doing that, make sure that you subscribe to browncarguy.com. And there's another place where you could go, some very exclusive piece of content, but I'll tell you about that at the end of this video.
Hello, my name is James Piecowye. This is Catching Up, and on this episode, we have the UK's most illustrious British Asian car journalist, and that's illustrious on the interweb from DXB to London. We have the Brown Car Guy joining us, Shazad Sheikh.
Hello, how you doing? Hello,
man.
James. Oh, it's been years. It feels like it's been years, man. But then it feels like it's been no time at all. It's incredible.
You know what? We were just talking about this, and I was saying that you're all over the net. Which, I mean, and this was your thing, and I got to say, you know, from photography to video, you're across all the socials and doing your thing. So it's almost like you never left. Yet you're not here.
I know. It's almost like I was a virtual construct anyway, so it doesn't matter. Whether I exist in Dubai or whether I exist in London, I exist online. It's as simple as that. I have web, therefore I am.
How long have you been gone? How long have you been gone from the UAE?
So I came back the night of New Year's Eve 2018.
Wow.
So that means pretty much, the whole of 2019 and the whole of this rather stupendous year so far for all the wrong reasons. Yeah.
You know, it has been the craziest ride, hasn't it? And when I think of from the time that you know, things were going on, we were on the radio, then things changed and all sorts of stuff. And in the years leading up to our whole, you know, as things were going, it all just blends into one big giant conversation.
Yeah, and it will. And it's about to commence, I suspect.
Well, you were. This is an example of us. Yeah. See if this one rings a bell. See if we can get it to go.
Every Monday night, we are smiling like a couple of mad people.
And if you want to get involved in the program, 4001 is the SMS number. 04-423-1010. Give us a call if it is safe to do so. We're talking about cars. We're talking about what we like, what we don't like, what you don't like, what's hot, what's not, and a whole bunch of stuff in between. So
I think at some point we got to talk about your shirt as well.
It's nice, isn't it? Isn't that a nice one? But
Fantastic.
2015.
My God, doesn't time fly? That's incredible. I'm a bit disappointed about your shirt because you're wearing a normal shirt today, but we are still smiling like two madmen, that's for sure.
I got the room though. Look, I got orange, I got red. And
it's pretty cool. But oh my God, doesn't time fly? In fact, to be honest, I remember when we concluded your show and I wanted to look back to see like how long we'd done it. And the only way I could figure out how to do it was to go back through Facebook, because obviously we always post on Facebook. It's wonderful things about it. And I worked out that it was 6 years, and I was actually blown away. I was really surprised that we'd done that show for 6 years. But the other thing about that show was, you know, we got so much love and appreciation from that show as well. I'll never forget being voice recognized in an airplane over the Atlantic. You know, I was chatting to a guy, and he was like, "I know your voice. You know, are you on the radio?" I'm like, "Yeah." Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
you know, as I was thinking about our show, and as I was sort of looking back at things, and you know, the accomplishments that you had here in the Middle East, and I mean, just so much time you spent here. One thing that kept coming back to me as I was looking at your career as an automotive journalist and beyond, because I'm not so sure I want to call you an automotive journalist anymore. I mean, I want to call you that. But you're so much more. I find that really pigeonholes you in a very particular place.
I am not a number. I am a free man. Yes, exactly.
But how did you get into the journalism gig to start with, Shahzad? And I think that's something we never really talked about when we were doing CarTalk. I don't think so.
Wow, that's amazing. No. In 6 years, we never discussed that. To be honest, it's like, well, I've discussed this recently quite a bit because I put out some content recently. I put out a video. If people are around, check it out, youtube.com/browncarguy. Haha, got my plug-in. But I put out a video called "It's Not Easy Being a Brown Car Guy," and I took it right back to the beginning of two aspects. Of how, you know, the car enthusiasm part came in. Because as I was discussing with somebody the other day, I was like, you know, with most people, you talk about, you know, the influence when it comes to being a petrol head. And it's normally it's a dad or it's an uncle or it's an environment or something happened. And in my youth, there was nobody at all. My dad hated driving. My brother still doesn't drive.
I couldn't believe that when I heard this in your interview, that your dad only drove because he had to.
No. So when we moved to Saudi Arabia in 1979, he still wasn't driving. You know, he tried to take the driving test in the UK a few times and he'd failed. He bought a Ford Anglia, which I don't know. We'll have to put a picture up of that. It's actually, the easy way to reference it was in the Harry Potter movies. You know, it's the car in the Harry Potter movies. It's that one. But he bought one because it was bright yellow with a black stripe on it, and he just liked the color. He had no idea about the car, so he just bought it on a whim. You know, and he thought, I'm going to practice on it. And then he drove it a few times, and he had a business at a time which was also not doing well. And the car got stolen. So that was it, you know, so that was that. So that was the end of his short-lived driving career in the UK. And then he moved to Saudi Arabia. And after a while, he realized that the only way to get around there, you know, it didn't have a well-developed public transport system like London did. So he was like, no, I have to get a car. But he was very, very scared, and he was very intimidated by it. So he said, I want to buy a big American car because I want to feel safe in it. So he was looking at a Buick Park Avenue or a Caprice Classic. He said, I want something like that.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, because I was already a petrol head by then, even though I don't know where this came from, nobody influenced me, but I was just a natural petrol head. And I knew my car, and I was like, no, you don't want one of those. You want a Honda. And he's like, what's a Honda? Oh, they make bikes. So I took him down to the Honda dealership, and on the spot, we bought a 1980 Honda Accord. It was a dealer demonstrator. So it was like a brand new car.
Well, hold on. You could have gone for a Buick Regal. You could have gone for any of these cars, a Caprice Classic, and you went for a Honda Accord?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a wonderful little car. And because the thing was, he was a little bit, although he wanted a big car, at the same time, he was a little bit intimidated by the size of driving a big car because he didn't like driving and he hadn't got much experience. Yeah. So I said to him, well, get this car because it's compact, but it's big enough for a family. And you can sort of get used to it. And he said, oh, that's a good plan. So he said, what I'll do is I'll get this and I'll drive it for like a year and then I'll get a Caprice Classic, which is what he wanted. He ended up keeping that Accord for the whole time he was there, which was 12 years. We had the same car. Yeah.
Wow.
Three paint jobs, one crash, you know, and we still had, and one overheated engine, and we still had the same car the whole time.
What kind of mileage did he have on that? Because it doesn't sound like he drove a lot.
No, he didn't, but I did.
So hold on a second. All of the time that we used to speak about Hondas, how is it that it never came to the fore of the conversation that your love of Hondas goes all the way back to when you first moved to the Middle East in Saudi Arabia with your dad and the fact that you convinced him to buy a Honda Accord?
Yeah, I did.
I feel ripped off here, Shahzad.
Oh my God. I tell you what, I'd give anything to find a Mark I white four-door Honda Accord now, because that would be so. Thing is, they've all rusted away and died, sadly, but that would be for me like the ultimate trip down memory lane, you know, to get one of those cars. But yeah, the thing was, he got the car and he just enjoyed, and it was, for the time, it was such a light and agile little thing. And he really actually, even though he hated driving, he actually enjoyed driving that car. And then he used to lend it to his friends and they were like, wow, this car is really good. And he was like, is it good? He goes, yeah, it's really good. So he was like, why do I need anything else? You know? So, so we kept it the whole time. What the mileage was, I don't know. but I certainly put a few miles on it when I was of driving age, shall I say. We'll leave out whether or not I had a license. We'll just say driving age.
Saudi Arabia was a whole different place then.
It was a bit different. Yeah, it was a bit different. But I have got a whole story about how I did get into trouble for driving without a license. So, but that's a whole other. That was actually my first car review.
Really?
So I have a story on browncarguy.com.
Have I seen pictures of you on the hood of that car?
You probably have. It was a Volvo. You probably saw black and white pictures of me on it. Yeah. And literally, I have a piece. You can Google it, and it's like my first car review got me arrested, which is actually true. Talk about winging it.
So how did the whole writing gig was that the start? Was that what really got?
So it was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, my two passions were always cars, and the other was always writing. Right from like primary school. I wrote a school play once. Don't ask me to recall what it was, but I remember that I actually remember I wrote a play and it got submitted. And then I was off school. I was sick or something. Because when I went back to school, they told me, "Oh, we're rehearsing your play." And I'm like, "What?" So, I mean, that actually happened,
Wow.
So I'd always been into writing. For a while, I did a comic book writing course because I wanted to be a comic book writer, and I actually put out some comics on small press as well. So these were my two passions, cars and writing. So my dad, when he worked in Saudi Arabia, he worked for a company that used to provide communications equipment. And one of the companies they used to provide, they were contracted to was I think Okaz, which published the Saudi Gazette, which was one of the two major English newspapers. Well, there's only two English newspapers. So there's Arab News and Saudi Gazette. So because I was into writing and stuff, whenever he used to go down there, I said, "Can I tag along?" If I was free, I was like, "Can I come?" Because I had like a newspaper office. Can you imagine at that time? Late 80s, early 90s. And it's like, that's a proper newspaper office, right? So, and I'd love it. I'd love going there and seeing all the people rushing back and, and seeing the paste up on the board, actually pasting up the newspaper, seeing the editor storm out of his office every now and then and shout at somebody. I was like, wow, this is awesome, So I got to be friends with a few people there, and I got to befriend a guy called Ramesh Bellan, who was actually the features editor on Saudi Gazette. And he was a smoker. This is in the days when you could smoke. So he used to have a glass cabin, a glass office, and you could barely see him because there would be cloud. You'd be like this to see him. It's like, Ramesh, you in there? And the really ironic thing was that he used to put out a supplement every Friday about why smoking is bad for you.
No.
So I got to chatting with him and stuff like that. I'd written a letter or two as well that had got published. And he was like, "What are you into?" And I'm like, "I'm into cars, I'm into this." And he goes, "Well, I want you to do some feature writing for me. And if you're able to do some car stuff, then do that as well." So I did both. I did some general features and I did some car stuff. And when I came to the UK, I did a special feature for him about the Bhangra scene, which was emerging at the time. So this was sort of the fusion between Asian and British music. And there was a whole scene that was emerging here. So I got to interview some of the top people here. So it was a really exciting time to sort of get into that. And to be honest, I caught the bug, and that was it. There was no looking back. There was like, that's what I'm doing.
Man, I mean, that's pretty exciting. I mean, the fact that you just sort of, you knew where you wanted to go. Your parents didn't dissuade you. They said, "Well, hey, do what you want to do," and look where it took you.
Well, correction. I mean, to be honest, they were a little bit alarmed, but we'd been through the whole Desi process, the Brown process of like, "Rita, you got to be a doctor." Well, at the first sight of blood, I fainted. So like, well, that is out. Then my dad was like, "Okay, you got to be an engineer like me," And I used to fix things and stuff like that. But, I wasn't particularly good at physics and stuff like that. So that was out. And then they were like, "Okay, Beta, you must be a pilot," And I had an uncle who used to be a flight engineer on one of the airlines. I think it was on PIA. And so whenever he used to come to Saudi, they would, "Oh, Beta, go and sit with your uncle. Go and sit with him," because they would like trying to get him to inspire me to go down that direction. And I was like, and for a while I was like, "Yeah, pilot sounds pretty cool. I mean, that's not bad, And then I started wearing glasses, and he was like, "Oh no, you can't be a pilot now. You got glasses on," So that was out the window. And then I was like, no, but what I actually love is writing or creating content. Is what when you say writing, really what you're saying is communicating, creating content. That's what you're really saying, and cars, and that's what I wanted to do. So when I got this opportunity, to basically gate crash into a features writer role at the Saudi Gazette, I was like, that's it. That's what I'm doing. I'm not looking back, So yeah, it was brilliant.
And as a stepping stone, when you look from the Saudi Gazette days and then you fast forward to today where you're making content in video, you're doing photographs, you're doing audio, you're doing social media galore, and still writing some, and but mixing it all up and mixing those media, what an interesting trajectory that it's all sort of come together in, and happens to be in the automotive industry, which is undergoing this complete transformation, partially because of fossil fuels, partially because of user desires, partially because of, more recently, COVID-19. It's what a time to be in this career.
I mean, it's quite extraordinary. I mean, to be honest, it's both good and bad, and the journey has been, there's been extreme highs and there's been extreme lows, and as with everybody else, you get those. It's not as easy as people think. It's quite a hard slog at times. It's not all just about driving cars all the time. Most of my time is spent here at the computer, staring into the abyss of the content stream and thinking, what am I going to produce next, So that's how most of my time is consumed. But yeah, I mean, you're quite right. At the moment, I mean, it's, we evolve and we develop along the way, and we take on new things, and we're constantly learning. So yeah, from writing to digital to online to video to broadcasting to doing radio with you, all of this sort of stuff, and doing TV. In fact, I did, a year of TV as well in Dubai. And doing live events, like I'd never imagined myself standing up on a stage and, engaging an audience and getting them all excited about, cars, but I love doing it, But right now it's really difficult. Coming back to the UK has been kind of like a reset button for me. I've had to sort of basically start from scratch. And then we've ended up in this situation. And the outcome of this situation is, I see it as one of two things. Either, because at the moment we had a statement yesterday from the Chancellor in the UK, Rishi, and he was like, yeah, we are definitely in a recession. There's none of this nonsense about bounce back. We are definitely, it's going to be hard. So, you're staring at that at the moment, and it's like, well, the car industry had it bad to start with. I mean, it had a succession of bad months last year and didn't have a great start to this year. So already you're looking at an industry that was in a bad place. However, you have a situation now where you have an industry like aviation, which is in a terrible place right now. And honestly, there is no hope for that in the foreseeable future. But you have a situation with cars where, there's been a lot of research out lately, which indicates that actually there's new interest, there's a resurgence of interest in cars, because people are like, well, how are we going to get around if we're not going to use airplanes, we're not going to use buses, and we're not going to use trains? There's only so far we can walk, and I don't want to cycle all over the place. So what's the alternative? It's cars. So all of a sudden, there were some stats out earlier in the UK a few weeks ago where they said that 56% of people that don't have a car but have a driving license are thinking that as soon as this lockdown ends, they're going to rush out and buy a car. And I worked it out. I worked it out that actually there's 41 million people in the UK with licenses, but only 32 million cars. That means there's 9 million people, right, without a car. So if you say that, well, say half of them, 56%, say half, say 4 million, say 4.5 million, suddenly decide they want to buy a car. Well, that's boom time for some industry, isn't it? Either it's used cars or lower market new cars. Suddenly, if the manufacturers and dealers can figure out how to cash in on that and how to to make the most of the zeitgeist as it is at the present, it could actually be happy days. But it's a possibility.
I always, this is one of those things that we've lamented forever. So you've got the used car industry that could make a boon of that. And then you've got the dealers and the manufacturers who've got to figure out, well, they've got a backlog of vehicles right now that they haven't been able to move. I mean, you remember Dubai very well. So I drive by Auto Mall at Festival City all the time, and I see the fields around there filling up with cars. Like, people just are holding back on buying right now because they don't know what's going to happen in 2 months. They don't know about their jobs. They want to hold on to their expendable cash. And I'm just thinking, like you said, if the market suddenly changes, not only do we have a boom effect for the used car market, but the new car market, if they can figure out how to move the stuff that's also sitting in their barns and get it on the road, this could be great days for so many people.
Yeah, I mean, I heard from one guy that some of the smaller used car dealers, you'd think they'd be in trouble and they'd be looking for cash flow, and a lot of them are. They're in problems, but there are some dealers that are quite clever. They've been going to auctions and buying up the cheap metal because they're like, well, okay, the cheap metal is going to move because people are going to come out. They're going, I need a car, so let's stock up on those because those are going to move. But you're quite right. I mean, it could. I mean, there is no guarantee that what I'm saying will actually happen. I suppose as usual, I'm taking a slightly optimistic view, because you have to, right? But you're quite right. Times are very tough, and I think for a lot of people, as you said at the beginning, this has been a time on which to look at their lives and look at the situation. If somebody's sitting there with a PCP or finance deal and they're spending, so in UK terms, they're spending £600-700 a month on a car that they now haven't used for 7 weeks, they're going to be thinking, do I really need to do that? Is that a good idea? Where I don't know, maybe I'm not going to work full time. Maybe my job isn't secure. Maybe I'm going to be made redundant. Maybe I'm on furlough. So a lot of people are going to be thinking. So it like I said at the beginning,
could go either way. Absolutely. Our sound has jumped out for a second, Shazad. We're going to wait for it to boot back in. Who knows? Every now and then when we're on Zoom and we're doing these kind of interviews, the sound is perfect, and then every once in a while it just disappears, and then it comes back.
Okay. Actually, it's been pretty good so far. The signal is strong. The signal is strong with this one.
Yeah, no, the signal's strong. I lost you for a second, but it's okay. We didn't. I wanted to ask you your observations from the time that you left and you headed to the UK. So you've had a wonderful period of overlap between your knowledge base in the Emirates and then heading back to the UK. Was there a big difference? Have you noticed a big difference in people's appetite for information about automobiles? You noticed a big change?
Not really. I think, it's kind of weird because you think that with this lockdown, you'd see a jump in traffic, but I think there's been such a deluge of content that's basically flooded the interwaves, if you like, because of the lockdown situation, that people are spoiled for choice. And it also goes back to, I think at the beginning of this lockdown, you got a lot of people going, oh, now I've got a lot of time, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But the reality is that actually the days go by very quickly. Everybody signed up to courses, and I bet most people didn't get beyond the first lesson, because that's kind of how it was, right? I hope those courses were free. I hope you didn't pay for them because, but it's one of those things where you just don't know. And I think that for myself, because I'm starting from scratch and I'm trying to build up my channels from afresh, and I've got a bit of momentum, a little bit of traction, but I think I just keep putting up content and just keep, like you say, I just keep bombarding people with the virtual version of me, and it kind of, it eventually starts to permeate. But I want to ask you the same question, because obviously you moved from radio into the arena of podcasting full time. I know you were podcasting before as well, but then now this is the thing. And so how's that been for you?
It's been an actually very interesting ride, and I would call what I've been doing in podcasting a rather slow burn, and on purpose. So only in the last month did we actually put up a web page that led people to the content. So the content was going up, and we did about a year's worth. So we got about 150 episodes in the back catalog between, we talk a little bit about cars, the basic shows, tech talk, DIY show, doc talk, and that. And literally, it was a slow burn to fill up some content, get some folks used to it, and then launch a web page that led people to that content as well, and provide a little bit of an anchor. And the real challenge, and I'm sure this is the same challenge you have, is there's a lot of stuff out there. So it's finding that niche and hitting home in that area and staying true to your to your core of what you're trying to do in your niche. And I think too many folks are trying to do too much and trying to be something else because they're listening to someone say, oh, you got to do this, and hey, you got to do that. And so we really deliberately worked at in a very non-commercial format where we're just working at getting that information out and producing it. And a lot like we did on the show when we were doing it on the radio, except so in a sense, very much having an honest conversation. I keep talking to people about that, saying, look, we're having an honest conversation. They say, yeah, but how do you make money off it? I said, well, at this point, we're not making any money off it. I said, I'm 100% honest to you. There's no money being made off this. And they said, so what's your goal? I said, at some point, a lot like we hope that someone, maybe the Nissan guy or the Toyota guy, say, hey, we'd like to sponsor an episode of what you're doing. Or someone else might say, hey, we want to sponsor a cross, but not have that Nissan ad at the start, but hey, this has been financed by Nissan, and away we go, and you talk about it in that way, and maybe you talk a little bit about something, but that really to create that sort of momentum. But otherwise, it's really been about having some fun and using some time wisely and saying it'll all come together. It's kind of naively.
But you're actually absolutely right. And I think, like you said, being true to what you are and not trying to be something that you're not. And I think, all the stuff that I've done, people are like, oh, you do this, you do that. I say, yeah, but that's still me. That's what I do. That's how that's how I like to communicate. And I was saying this to somebody the other day in one of the previous episodes. I meet a lot of young people that say, well, we want to do what you do. And my question to them is like, why do you want to do it? If the answer is like, because I want to drive cool cars, it's like, well, then that's not the right answer, because that's not why I do this. I've done all the cool cars. I've driven everything. It doesn't really matter to me that much. It's great, but it's a bonus, but that's not what it's about. For me, it's always been, like you say, it's been about being able to communicate, being able to create content that engages with people, being able to help people. A lot of what I do is help people, get the right car or choose the right car for them or just make a decision, and a lot of people DM me and stuff like that. And I help the people to do that. 9 times out of 10, I think, people come back and say, oh, thanks for that. That was good advice, and to me, that's kind of the ultimate reward. Of course, you can't pay your bills with that sort of reward, but that is the ultimate reward, right? It's like when you get good feedback, when you get a good response, when people say, you really helped me, or that was a really good piece of content, or I really enjoyed that. And I think that you've got to understand that's why you're doing it, then do it. But if you're doing it for motives such as, I want to make a ton of money out of this, or I want to drive a lot of cool cars, like, well, you know what? You might want to try something else, because this isn't the route that's going to get you there. That's not going to happen. Also, the other thing I wanted to ask you is that obviously you had a massive following on the radio. This was on dubaieye every night, on the evening shows you did. Were you able to translate that audience, or were you able to pull that audience across to this new format of your content?
It's a slow burn, because the challenge with radio is once they close the door, they close the door and people lose track of you. So what's been happening lately, and through social media and getting it out on Facebook, and the more I tag in dubaieye 103.8 FM onto things, the more people who are following in those genres realize, the guy's still here and still making that content. It's slow to get that audience to figure out where you are, as those stations don't really want people to know where you went.
Yeah, of course, I know. You're kind of like a rival to them now, aren't you? Yeah. By the way, for the purposes of my listeners and viewers, just say where they can find you.
So if you want to find us, podaholiks with a K. If you Google it, you will find us. podaholikswithak.com is how you can find what we're doing here, and it's across all the socials. Same thing, podaholiks with a K. So awesome. It's pretty simple. Yeah, thank you very much for that. By the way, glad we could get that. Glad we could get that plug in. This is actually one of my pet peeves, and it's the whole reason. I got to say, and you would get into this too, because the whole reason I got into doing radio was from a rant that I wrote in 7 days. I was really lucky that the folks over at 7 Days, and actually Mustafa Awawi, who was the assistant editor at the time when I was doing this stuff, he's now an assistant editor over at the National in Abu Dhabi, which I got to reach out to him and say hello again, because it's been a while since we had a conversation. But the Tony Metcalf over at 7 Days used to give me the luxury as a university professor to write an opinion piece, and he would give me a full centerfold page, both sides of the fold, in 7 days. And I wrote this article about how crappy Dubai radio was. Touched a nerve, I gotta say. Didn't realize how much of a nerve it touched.
So and it's like, come and have a go if you think you're good enough. And you're like, all right then.
Yeah, well, pretty much. I got invited on dubaieye, and Jason Lumber was hosting Nightline, and he invited me on, and he grilled me, and he says, "Well, what do you mean about this?" And he whipped it out. He had it highlighted. What do you mean by this? And I was pretty blunt on the stations too. I named and shamed and said why I didn't like them. And from that show, I ended up getting a job on Dubaieye doing radio. And my whole thing right from the very beginning was always, I'm only going to do the type of radio that I want to listen to. And that was it. And that really became the mantra for 12 years of me doing radio on Dubaieye.
That's incredible.
And the shows would change over periods. So they would morph and they would move a little bit. And people would say, well, why are you doing this show? I said, because that's what I want to listen to.
Exactly.
What do you mean? So
that's interesting. That was quite a confrontational start to your radio career. But often some of the great things are. I was talking to a guy called Adil, who is one of the pioneer motoring journalists in India, and he's been doing it for I think 40 years or something. You know, and he was telling me about how when he was quite young, he went out to cover there was an international rally that was going through his part of India. So he went out to cover it, right? So he'd set up, he'd basically identified the best place where he was going to take pictures, and he basically set up himself there. And then lo and behold, some newspaper guys turn up and they grab his place. So he gets into a bit of a barney with them. He's like, well, I've been here all morning, and but we're a newspaper. I'm like, yeah, I don't care, So and then he came back and he said, well, you don't even know what you're talking about. You don't even know what these cars are and all this sort of stuff. So they said to him, I said, well, okay, why don't you come down to the paper tonight and you can write the report?
Wow.
Yeah, and that's how his career actually started. I mean, isn't that amazing? That's incredible. It started because he had a fight with the newspaper guys.
That's pretty amazing.
It's brilliant.
We always talked, and this was when we were doing radio days, you and I, we always talked about money. And we always talked about, and we kind of had a love-hate relationship, not you and I, but the program with the marketing department, because the marketing guys were always trying to get money from all of the automotive manufacturers. And between you, Imtishan, and myself, we were pretty good at slaying pretty much every manufacturer on every show. Someone would hate them, someone would be in the middle, and someone would love them. But no one ever remembered love.
It's quite funny. I guess we can talk about this now, can't we? Because it's not an issue anymore. But I mean, this is the thing. I want to dismiss a misconception that existed at the time. And this is in particular regards. I mean, let's just come out and say it. For example, some manufacturers like Nissan, for example, that had got it into their head that we were anti-Nissan. And that was never the case. It was never the case. We're car journalists. We're car lovers. We're petrol heads first and foremost. Which by its definition means we love cars. Doesn't matter who makes them. We love cars. We want them to be good. So that's not true. But one of the things that we were very careful about on the show was that we wanted to, there'd be three of us. There'd be you, me, and Imtishan. Sometimes more, sometimes there'd be less of us. Sometimes we'd have another guest, say Fraser or Noel, whoever, And because there were so many voices on there, it would make for a very dull show if we all said, what do you all think of the new Volkswagen Golf? Yes, it's very nice. Yes, it's very nice. Yes, it's very nice. Oh, there's an echo in here. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, this is boring, So it was very important to try and bring different points of view to it. And because of our exposure to car owners and car consumers and enthusiasts, we have all the different viewpoints. We know what people think about cars. We know where they fit in culturally, So we were able to bring those. We were able to voice them. And so every now and then we'd play devil's advocate. And it wouldn't always be consistent. If people watch the show, if people listen to the show throughout the 6 years, they'd realize that, 1 week, I'd be loving a Toyota, and the next week I'd be hating the same Toyota. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, but the thing is, we felt that that's what made the conversation interesting. We felt that that's what brought the people's voice into the show, and that's why people listened.
And legitimately, this is what when you talk about youth who want to get into this and they say, oh, I can't wait to drive the cars. Driving some of these cars was a pain in the rear end. You had to go get them. You had to drive it. You hope you didn't smash it up. You had to go deliver it back in some cases. And I remember distinctly having a car one time, and I can't remember if it was a Ford. Was it one of the Fords that I was driving? Oh, no. You know what it was? It was a Toyota. And it was the Toyota... the one that was like a go-kart, so the one that Subaru had as well.
Yeah, the 86, the GT86.
There we go, the 86. Yeah. And I think I drove it for one day, and then it sat in my driveway. Yeah. Because I didn't like it. And I literally, I drove it one day, that was it. And then for 1 week, it sat in the driveway because, but the first day when I got into it, and if we'd had a conversation on air the first day, and if I talked to you, it's like, oh man, this is a great car. It's like a go-kart. I love it. And then by the second day, I was like, I don't like this car anymore.
No, it happens. You see, and this is what because manufacturers, they're myopic. They live in their own bubble. They live in their own marketing and PR bubble. And so their product is brilliant to them. But what they got to realize is that petrol heads are different. Like, I mean, you're both equally right and equally wrong about the GT86. I love that car. It's fantastic. But I know a lot of people that don't like it. And it's not that they're wrong.
You don't want to have a bad back if you own that car. You can't get into that car.
Exactly. Their point of view is valid, and sometimes your opinion changes over the days, like you said. I mean, I remember every time I drive a Caterham. So a Caterham, what people know, is that bare bones, back to basic, two-seater. It's got nothing. The wheel, an engine, and wheels. That's it. That's all it's got. And the design basically harks back over 50 years. It's the same design pretty much. Yeah. I always find with those cars is that the first day, or at least the first half a day that I drive it, I hate it.
Yeah.
Because you're having to relearn everything all over again, and it's very uncomfortable. From then onwards, I absolutely fall in love with it every single time, and I can't get enough of it. But it takes that amount of time to reacclimatize, to readjust. So similarly, this is why sometimes when we tell people to buy cars and we say take a test drive, take an extended test drive, because sometimes the first impression won't be, you'll love the car, then you'll buy it, then you'll hate it because actually it didn't meet your needs. And I think one of the things we were careful about on the radio show is that we tried to bring the fact that different people have different viewpoints, and they're not right, they're not necessarily right, they're not necessarily wrong. It's a viewpoint, and people are allowed to have that. And this is what some manufacturers, to be fair, not all of them, but some fail to understand.
Well, and it was always interesting because you would like a car for one reason, Imtisham would dislike a car for another reason, and I would dislike a car for a completely different reason. And
you'd hate it if the radio wasn't good. You'd be like, that's it.
and my issues right now. I mean, I'm still driving the same old Wranglers. And it was a sad day. It was a sad day when I went over to Rage Performance Garage. I gave them a call and found out that Sam wasn't there anymore.
Oh my God.
He saw the light and he went back to the dealer.
Oh, right. Oh, I see. Okay.
And he said, you can keep going there. And I'm going, but Sam, I went to Rage because of you. Yeah. So had to move on to my new garage, which worked out okay. But but the whole thing was someone said to me, why don't you get a brand new Jeep? Why don't you? This is a time to buy one. And I looked at them and I said, do you want to know why I'm not getting the better Jeep with the nice Pentastar engine and this, that? I don't like the steering wheel in the new Jeeps. Yeah. And they just looked at me and they went, what? I said, no, I don't like the steering wheel. Yeah. And they said, you're joking. I said, no. Well, I'm 100% serious. I do not like the steering wheel, but it's a new car. I said, yeah, but I'm going to have to hold on to that thing. Exactly, and every time I get in, I'm going to be going, I hate the steering wheel. So I'm not buying a new one. I'm going to keep mine as long as I can.
True. It can be one thing. It can be the steering wheel. It can be the seat. It can be the stereo. It can be the fact that the USB doesn't fit my phone or my phone doesn't talk to this car. It can be one thing, And this is what manufacturers sometimes, this is what they don't understand, is that whenever they get upset that we are maybe a bit blunt about their car, what they don't realize is that an owner, a consumer, a punter is going to be far more brutal. More brutal. When we meet people, when we were out there, we were meeting people on car meets or events, and we say, I just drove this car. Well, I don't like it. Why you don't like it? I don't like the badge. I don't like the color. I don't like the steering wheel. I don't like the engine. I'm like, that's like one aspect of the car. Yeah. But you're like, but you know what? That's fine. Because for that one person, that's his car. That's her car. That's the car they're going to own. So if there's one thing they don't like about it, fair enough. From a journalistic point of view, we have to assess cars on in multiple different areas across multiple different reasons, because we have to assess them in different ways. So for us, we have to understand every aspect of a car. But for a punter or an owner, it's the one thing. If I'm not comfortable in how high I'm sitting in this car, it doesn't work for me. That's it. End of.
So we've run into an interesting scenario now for you and I, which puts us in a very interesting position. So I'm not talking cars, but I'm talking about the general way that we create content. Is think about the last 2 months. And, think about Dubai, if you want to use Dubai as an example. Dubai is a great example. That we don't have people driving anywhere right now. Very limited number of drivers. And there's no school runs. Yeah. None in the morning, none at night. Traditional media relies on the breakfast show and the evening drive show, where you get all of your investment because people are trapped in their cars and they're listening to crappy radio. Now They're not listening to any radio because, as you and I know, most people don't listen to the radio in their homes.
No.
So
no,
suddenly,
exactly right. Yeah.
and that radio that already couldn't tell you how many people were actually listening to it, the marketing guys now are scrambling because they can't justify, well, we want to put some money into, XYZ radio station, when they're going to go, how many people are listening? Well, we think.
Yeah,
They did
we
some
think,
inquiries, think whether, hold on, let me get out the magic 8 ball and shake it up a
Yeah.
little bit. I don't know, right? But you and I can say, well, hold on a second. Here's the reach. Here's the engagement across different platforms. And you and I can sit down with these marketing people and say, now hold on a second, let me give you the crash course, because when we talk reach and engagement, and I get this all the time actually at the university. I've got faculty members that I work with who don't understand the terms. And they'll say, well, what's your reach and engagement? I say, well, hold on. Now this becomes a really interesting thing, because are we talking my reach and engagement on LinkedIn? Are we talking my reach and engagement on YouTube? Are we talking my reach and engagement on Twitter? Are we talking my reach and engagement on the podcast that's coming out of Anchor? Or is it through Google, or is it through iTunes? Because all of those different delivery systems measure different things and have different people coming at it. So now I've got this whole giant thing, which at the end of the day, I can tell you how many people are actually touching this. And LinkedIn's beautiful because it'll tell you, hey, you know what? You just put up a podcast and 400 people listen to it. And it's like, hey, you know what? Can you tell me for a fact that 400 people listen to anything we did on the radio? No. No, I don't know.
Exactly. And just for the benefit of people that might be listening or viewing this on my channel, just tell people what you do at university.
So I'm an associate professor of communication inside university, and I teach media theory, actually. So people always say, oh, you must teach broadcasting. Nah, I don't.
But all of this is particularly pertinent. All of this is particularly pertinent in light of both what you do professionally and what you do here, because it's all about media. And I think that you've touched on something very interesting as to this situation that we're going through. This COVID-19 is. I think it's now clear it's going to have a fundamental impact on everything about society, not only about how we work, what we do, but also about the media that we consume. I was reading a report yesterday about the fact that one of the biggest publishers in the UK is thinking of closing a whole raft of magazines. And you go, wow, that makes sense, because another major publisher put out a press release, a campaign. They called it "Get Britain Moving Again." What it actually, if you translated it, what it actually means is, our magazines don't have any adverts this month. We're giving them away. That's what they were really saying.
There we go.
And that's a disaster. That's an absolute disaster. And if you think about how media was consumed and how it's now being consumed, it's changing before our very eyes. And like you said, who's going to listen to the radio? I hardly even watch the TV. I only watch the TV for the daily briefing on what's happening with the virus every day. That's the only reason I watch it.
I got to tell you, we've got our feed comes in to the house, and I've got a box. I looked the other day and I wonder where the HDMI connector went for that thing. Not because I wanted to watch anything on it, because I wanted to use it for something else. We watch zero TV that we're not getting off of our computer. In fact, I listen I think our content now in our home is exclusively coming off Spotify and podcasts.
Exactly.
That's it.
And I think that's true for a lot of people. Spotify, podcasts, and of course Netflix or Amazon Prime. It's all on-demand content. And I think this is going to change the way we consume. It's the way we're changing automotive media, for example. If I just take that one niche because I work in it, I mean, it's already. I'm getting cancellations. If I'm being honest right now, I'm getting cancellations right now because it's all reducing. And it's like, well, then it becomes about individual content creators and how, like you say, we can directly reach an audience, and we can show that we are reaching an audience and influencing people and impacting people way more than so-called influencers, which don't, going right back to the beginning of what you said, where you started this career because you had something to say, you had a rant, you had something to say. I started this because I had something to say, I had a desire to communicate. What differentiates us from the influencers is the influencers, they don't have anything to say. They just want to, look, yo, I'm here, check me out. That's what they're doing. So when it comes to a situation like now where people have got a bit more time than just scrolling through an image, and they're like, well, what have you actually got to say? They don't have anything to say, but we do. So fundamentally, it's changing the way people are looking at media, where they're finding it, and how they're consuming it. Even down to movies. I mean, there's no movies in the cinema because the cinemas are closed. So who's the only person that got a movie release? It's the guy that plays Thor. What's his name? Because his big movie went out on Netflix. So all of a sudden, you had a major movie. It's the only thing people had a new movie premiere that was on Netflix. It's like, wow. Okay, so is that the future now?
That's Chris Hemsworth.
Chris Hemsworth, that's the guy. Yeah.
I gotta say, did you watch that movie?
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm saving it for Eid, so I'll watch it after Eid.
I'm not going to give you any spoilers, except for the fact there's two things that happen in that movie. First of all, he basically is Thor in the military. Let's just put it that way. You just expect at one point a hammer to come into his hand.
Yeah.
It's like I'm watching it going, this is not real. There's just no way.
He should, you know, like Arnold Schwarzenegger has to say, "I'll be back" in every line. At some point, he should hold a hammer in every movie that he's in. It should just happen, right?
The second part of that movie, and you're gonna watch for it, is there's a woman who's also involved in the escapade. Her hair in all scenes is perfect, but it's a war zone.
It's always the case. No, I'll tell you why, you know, and this is how sad we are as car people. I'll tell you why I want to watch it, right? Because I watched the trailer, right? And this will make you, everybody listening and watching, this will make you want to go back and watch the trailer now. There's a sequence in the trailer where I think he's in a Mercedes. And he's reversing down an alley trying to get away from the baddies. And then he does a J-turn, which for people that know is a reverse flip, right? So when the camera, this is one shot, the camera shows the car reversing towards the camera. It shows the car flipping around, doing a perfect J-turn, you know, with him at the wheel. Maybe it's on skates, I don't know, because of all kinds of effects. But then here's the crazy thing. The camera then goes into the back seat of the car through the window in one sequence. Mind blown. I was like, wow, how did they do that? I called my son Junaid because he's doing, you know, media production. I said, come and look at this. And he was like, wow, that's a really good shot. I want to watch them. We're going back to that one thing now. That one thing with cars that affects people. That one thing with movie. I want to watch the movie because of that one sequence impressed me.
So I was asking you about Westworld 3, if you'd managed to watch any of Westworld.
No, I didn't know. I think I only watched it as far as the second series. I don't think I got up with the third series, no.
Oh, you need to. You need to. It's.
I heard it took a different direction, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
And it's not.
I mean, it fascinated me because I was a fan of the original Westworld with Yul Brynner.
Yes.
Which I do believe must have been the model for the original Terminator movie.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Because it's like it's almost like he does the same. Arnold Schwarzenegger does Yul Brynner, you know.
Yeah.
But one of the things that as a kid, oh my God, that movie burned its way into my mind because of the sheer inscrutable relentlessness of Yul Brynner. Yeah. Determined to carry out his task no matter what. Yeah. You know, and nothing would dissuade him and nothing would stop him. And to just to use that metaphor as a life metaphor, I guess for a lot of people that kind of translates into, especially those of us that do stuff that's passion driven or creativity driven. We're kind of obstinate, aren't we? We're kind of a bit blinkered, and we're like, no, we're doing this, and people are like, no, it's a bad idea. It's bad for your career. It's bad for your finances. It's bad for your. You're like, no, this is what I'm doing because I'm determined, and you shall not dissuade me.
There's a link with Westworld 3 in this conversation because there is one of the episodes and there's a scene where there's a car crash. And I'm looking at this futuristic car and I'm going, that looks like a Wrangler.
All right.
Well, I mean, it's not, but it is. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, no, those mirrors, that's a Wrangler.
Yeah.
Only because I drive one. So I'm going, that really looks like a Wrangler to me. And as it turns out, at the end of that episode, they had a making of, and literally they did use a Wrangler for the explosion scene where they kind of mapped out the vehicle that was being used, and they put in, mapped out the Wrangler and put in this other vehicle. It must have been on the same. And it's funny because you just start looking at little things to these cars. What is that? What's that armrest like? And hold on.
As a car person, you're always doing that, aren't you? But the thing is, technically, there shouldn't be any such thing as a futuristic Wrangler. It should. I imagine the Wrangler will always look the same. In the year 2100, it will still look the same. It will have to, right? It'll still have to look the same. But I tell you a car you should check out now that we're talking about this. This is quite extraordinary. There's a car in America called I think it's called the Rezvani Tank X.
The Rezvani Tank X.
The Rezvani Tank X. And what this thing is, It's armored.
Yeah.
It's bulletproof. It's got night vision on it. It's got strobing lights that basically blind anybody that's trying to, attack you or follow you or anything like that. But most cool of all, it's the only car in the world ever to have a military-grade EMP shield.
Really?
Electromagnetic pulse radiation.
Really?
The electronics can withstand a nuclear blast.
Wow.
And then it gets cooler. You're like, well, how am I going to get away from a nuclear blast? It's got the engine out of a Dodge Demon, but uprated to 1,000 horsepower. It's raised on shocks. It's got big off-road tires. And the reason why I brought it all up is because fundamentally the entire thing is actually based on the Wrangler.
There you go. There you go.
An incredible vehicle.
Oh man! So what kind of vehicles are catching your attention these days? What are you saying that? Oh man, I'd love to get behind the wheel of that thing. What's on your radar?
The irony of it all is that since I moved back here from Dubai, what I'm missing most is the V8 muscle cars. That's because I've had, obviously, I haven't driven much this year because I had 6 cars lined up to test before this thing happened, and of course they all got cancelled. But most of the cars I've been driving since I've been out here have been diesels and 2-liter petrols and 3-liter engines and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, give me a V8 again, please. I do miss the rumble of a V8.
I had the opportunity before this whole COVID thing. We had a trip, and we were down in South Africa, and we went to Kruger Park with some friends in a Defender. I got to tell you, that's the worst vehicle I've ever driven in my life.
That's the current. It's the previous model Defender, right? The one, the traditional Defender.
Yeah, maybe 1995.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this is the worst vehicle ever. I couldn't believe it. It looks nice. And you go into the game park and you're in a Landy and thinking, oh, this is great. Yeah. I don't think I've ever been so uncomfortable in my life. And things in it. I mean, I truly had never really had a good drive in one to really appreciate how terrible this vehicle was. I was just looking at, the knob on the dash for the vents. And I'm going, what era was this invented? I think it's original from 1950.
Yeah. I think you and I combined now are going to upset the entire British public now because I agree with you. I agree. It's quite funny because coming back to the UK and whenever anybody talks about off-roading and they're like, well, Defender, the good old Lander, the Defender, that's the only way to go off-road. And I'm like, no, no, that's not. First of all, it'll fall to bits. It'll break down. That's no good if you're in the desert because you'll die. So no wonder that the Middle East has always sworn by Toyotas and Nissans because those are the cars that will keep you alive in the desert. And secondly, if you really want to go anywhere and you want to be comfortable doing it, the only way to do it is a Wrangler. That is the only way. And and people over here don't get it, But the reality is you're quite right. As much as I respect the Land Rover Defender, as much as it deservedly occupies a legendary position and an iconic status, and as much as it is responsible for having explorations and all kinds of stuff that it's done, the reality is that it's a fundamentally old design that's fundamentally not very well built. And it's extremely uncomfortable if you're anywhere north than 5'5". That's the problem. I once... when I was back at Car Middle East magazine, I borrowed a Land Rover Defender that had no roof, had nothing, so it was a 2-door, it was a shorty, right? And we had it in the summer, and it was the boss's car, the boss of the Land Rover. They said, we're lending you the boss's car. I'm like, cool. And they said, oh, you know what? You can keep it for the weekend. I'm like, oh, cool, all right. So we went out on a Friday. We went to a place called Jazeerat Al Hamra in Ras Al Khaimah, I think, if I correct it. If I didn't get that right, I'll put it on the screen or you can correct it later. And that's the place famously known as the Haunted Village. So we did a shoot there. And it's kind of cool. I still have the pictures. It was a brilliant shoot. We had a great time. And at the end of it, we drove back. So it was like an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back. You can't go too fast in this thing, as you know. And I had no roof, and it was uncomfortable, and it was hot, and plus my knees were killing me because I've got long legs, and it's too cramped, and I just couldn't drive it. So instead of taking it home, I actually took it back to Land Rover that same day, and I said, I'm done with this. We've done the shoot. I've got the feature. I know what I'm writing. I'm done. You can have the car back. They're like, oh. really? I'm like, yeah, really. You know, and I know exactly what you mean. And this is what people don't understand, is that where those cars, the Land Rover, and even to a large extent the G-Wagon from Mercedes, have stood still in time, the Wrangler has constantly moved. It's constantly evolved. It's always, you know, they've always made it comfortable. It looks the same on the outside, but on the inside, it's a really nice place to be. It's comfortable. It's got all modern mod cons in it. You've got, you not only have USB points, but you have micro USB points. I mean, that's how up to date that car is, you know. So I think a lot of people don't quite appreciate what Jeep has achieved with the Wrangler. But yeah, I mean, things like Defender and G-Wagon have their status in the annals of automotive history. But sometimes you've got to take the rose-tinted specs off and go, yeah, they weren't that great.
It's a funny. Here's another funny one. One of the Chinese vehicles, I think it's the Geely, and I might be misstating, and I'll have to get it clarified. But I was talking with Glenn Power, who's opened up his own garage. PowerWorks now is what it's.
Oh, that's a good name, that.
Isn't that?
PowerWorks, yeah.
PowerWorks Automotive. Yeah. It's brand new. He's just opened it up. He's gone into business for himself.
Give him my best. Give him my best, and tell him I wish him good luck.
He's a big fan. He follows Brown Car Guy. He's
awesome.
Listening. Because we still do a podcast together. You probably come up every second podcast. There's something
awesome.
Brown Car Guy. Yeah. So, he's a big Volkswagen guy. And he was talking, I'm pretty sure it's a Geely that he was talking about. And whatever model it was that came into the shop, he gets under the hood and he says, this whole thing's Volkswagen. He says, in fact, someone sent him, they needed a battery, and he thought it was for this guy's A6. He shows up and he says, oh, no, it's not for the A6, it's for the Geely. And he's going, oh. And so he gets under the hood. Even the terminals were Volkswagen. He said, this is a Volkswagen.
Was it Volkswagen or Volvo?
He said it was a Volkswagen, but maybe
really
it was
interesting because the thing about Geely or Geely, however you want to pronounce it, you know, I'm never quite sure. But because I mean, I was talking about this
because maybe it wasn't Geely, maybe it was one of the other cars.
Oh, right. But it would make perfect sense to me if it was a Geely and it was Volvo, because they obviously own Volvo.
Yeah.
And the last time that I reviewed one, which is about 2.5 years ago, and I was actually quite
best air conditioning. You said that thing had like an icebox. I remember.
Really good. It was I think it was a Geely M Grand X7 SUV, and it was the first time that I actually considered recommending a Chinese car because it was that good. It actually felt solid. It didn't feel like it was going to fall apart, and you could immediately see the influence of Volvo. You're like, yeah, you can already see that. Like conversely, Geely also bought the London Taxi Company.
Oh, really?
Which produced the traditional taxi here. Now, the traditional taxi here, although, you know, like the Defender, as wonderful as they are, as iconic as they are, as rubbish as they are, let's be absolutely honest. You know, they're just, you know. But what they've done, I went to the factory. They built a brand new factory in Coventry. They build these cars like proper cars. A large part of the components that go into them are actually Volvo. And now you look at one of these new taxis, which are electric hybrids, so plug-in electric hybrids, range extenders. So actually, they only use the electric motor. They're amazing, and they're so beautifully built. And that's down to a Chinese company buying a traditional British company and using Swedish know-how to create an entirely new car. What an incredible world it is.
What a story. And this is where we're going, isn't it? You know, it's becoming interesting. And I think, you know, it's that whole topic about, well, is the auto industry dead? And I think I always look at it and I say, I don't think the auto industry is dead as much as it's being forced to rethink and reconsider and reimagine itself. And you know, if COVID-19 does anything, it's that swift kick in the pants to say, okay, you got to kind of do it like yesterday. You've kind of been sitting on your hands and, you know, milking the technology. And we used to talk about this for 5 years. You know, internal combustion engines haven't really changed. The basic design of a car hasn't really changed. Elon Musk, thanks to that guy, he really kicked everyone in the pants and got them thinking electric. Should really be thinking hydrogen, but hey, that's a whole other argument.
I agree with you. Exactly. But you're quite right. And I think that one of the things that's coming out from this situation is that, you know, we've tasted the benefits to the environment of, you know, 6-7 weeks of not having traditional forms of transport at the scale that they normally exist. So so not just cars, but air transport, shipping, all the rest of it. And we've seen that in cities like London. We've seen the difference. I'm sure in Dubai you've probably seen the difference as well.
Phenomenal.
You know? And I think a lot of us are like, we like this. We like this. This is good. Even as petrol heads, we're like, yeah, but it's nice to have clean air,
Yeah.
So I think, so I think there is going to be a fundamental shift. I mean, already in London, there's a big hoo-ha. There's a big fight now between the mayor of London and the government of London, because the mayor of London wants to turn the whole of central London into a car-free zone. And he's already started widening the pavements and basically restricting cars, and all of this sort of stuff is happening. Meanwhile, the government is saying, don't go to work on public transport, use a car. So that's why there's a bit of a clash going on.
Yeah.
So, and certainly, he's going to fall foul of the car industry as well, because they need incentives to get back on their feet. Meanwhile, there's a mayor of a major city saying, no cars. That's it. We're done with them. Yeah. But I can also understand, despite being a petrol head, I can understand his point of view as well, in that he's like, well, London is better for it, so why don't we just do this, But you're quite right. I think that, as we said at the beginning, I think this entire situation is going to cause a seismic shift in our attitudes and our thinking about everything, from the way we work to the way we travel to the way we consume media, everything that we've spoken about.
Well, and taking it back to that consuming the media, you and I, again, find ourselves in this unique position and I guess it's the challenge. We're talking about the automotive industry. It's the marketing industry now needs to catch up and say, do I need to, because they operate, I mean, you and I both know this. You worked in the industry. They operate on the mud on the wall technique of advertising. We're going to throw as much at the wall as we can, and one little droplet's going to stick, and that's what people are going to buy. And as opposed to saying, hey, Brown Car Guy, he's on these 4 different channels that are reaching 4 different audiences. Let's fire some money at him and see what people do.
Well, it's very interesting what you're saying, because, for example, like you take one of the things that has become very apparent in the UK is the contribution of what they call here the BAME. This is Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic communities. And one of the things that I think is often ignored is the sheer buying power and spending power of those communities. And because of the diversification of media, traditionally, like we touched on, back when I was a kid, we watched 3 channels on TV. That's what all of us watched, the same 3 channels, because there was nothing else, But of course, now everybody has separate, they're consuming online media, it's on demand, So I think that an industry does have to look at widening and broadening its remit and its appeal and its marketing at different people. But as you quite rightly say, the whole notion of throwing everything at it is not going to work anymore. This whole situation has caught a lot of people out. People have pulled their advertising, not because there's no market, but it's because they don't know what their messaging is anymore. And I'm not just talking cars, but you take like sports brands. You take brands that sponsor sporting events. They're like, what's our messaging now? Get out and do it. No, that's not our messaging. Stay home. It's like, it doesn't make sense anymore. So everybody's in this confused position. You got a lot of brands trying to do things like, okay, let's, so you take like shoe companies going, let's give shoes to the NHS or the medical practitioners. Let's do this. Let's try and do something where we appear worthy. But even that's a delicate balancing act, because you can appear pretentious instead of worthy if you don't get that messaging right, So I think a lot of marketing and PR people are also scattering right now and going, what do we do? How do we spin this into a positive? How do we do that? And it's like I said earlier, a major publishing house saying, let's get Britain moving again. That's nonsense. That's just them trying to spin a positive on the fact that the market is screwed because they haven't had any advertising this month.
Well, here's the other thing, and I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but I'm starting to experience this, and it's blowing my mind, because you're on social media, I'm on social media. You're making video, you're doing some audio, I'm doing a bunch of audio, I'm doing a few videos too. I put together, I don't know if you managed to see it, and it's hilarious. It's purely selfishly being produced for tips on how to do better video conferencing, because I've sat through so many Zooms that are horrible that I just started doing a tip show. And
I haven't seen those. I will watch them now, but I have seen some of the short tips that you did on Instagram, which I thought were hilarious. You did like the quick tips one. But yeah, I mean, I whenever I can, particularly on Instagram, I always love your stuff. Awesome.
So what I really was in this mindset when we start talking podcasting, for instance. I mean, this is not rocket science. I mean, with a computer, get a decent mic. I use Rode equipment. I'm using Shure equipment. I'm running this into a Mac PowerBook. I mean, this is not expensive to do. And, I run this essentially off of Anchor, is where this lives.
Me too. Yeah, same.
And then it goes into all these other different channels. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, this is, this is pretty easy. This is
And
really easy.
I think what you're touching upon there, and what I think, brands are potentially missing, is the fact that it's a bit like radio, except not radio anymore. This is the compelling audience, because where do most people listen to podcasts? I do the same thing. When I go out for my half an hour exercise, because they say you must go out and do exercise. And actually they're right, because having spent the first 5 weeks at home, I really started to suffer. So now I do try to go out. So when I go out there, I normally put some earphones in, and it's not so much music. I'm like, okay, what are the podcasts I listen to? And I listen to several. I listen to you. I listen to people like Gary Vee. I listen to Collecting Cars over here and Smoking Tires. So some of the automotive
you're listening
podcasts.
to Gary Vee, and I haven't heard one F-bomb come from you. That's good.
Oh no, I listen to him. I don't copy him. I do. He is quite hilarious in the way he does that. It's quite funny, but some of his stuff is really interesting. So when you're out walking, you're going to do like a 20-30 minute walk. You're like, okay, I can plug in and I can just do that. And I think that's true for a lot of people. Is that when they're out and they're traveling or they're on their own, that's when they're doing it. And when you've got your voice is in their ear, they're not getting rid of it. It's there. So there isn't a more compelled audience at that point.
Here's the thing that's going on in my head, though. Let me draw it right back to you here. Is I start talking to some companies and some different groups, and they have no idea. And I'm saying, hold on a second. You're making this widget. You're doing this kind of business. You guys need a podcast. Why aren't you podcasting and putting it on your site? Your site traffic. You're getting 5,000 people a day. 5,000 people a day want to hear a little bit about your organization. They want to hear about the people. They want to hear about the human side of what you do. Why aren't you guys doing a podcast? And their eyes glaze over. Well, how would we do that? And I'm thinking, and I'm looking around, and I'm looking for the camera going, this is a joke, right? Like, you guys are joking me. And they're looking at me straight.
At this point, it's like, we'd already touched on Gary Vee. At this point, it's the Gary Vee response. It's like, do you have an effing phone in your pocket? Yes. Well, then you can do it. That's it. That's all you need.
So I kind of look at them, and this is, again, where I think this is the niche where you and I fit into things nicely, because you've got this nice catalog of content where you can say, hey, this is me. I can show you how to do it. The reality is, these organizations I'm talking to, I can show them how to do it. They're never going to do it. But if I help them do it for a small fee.
Exactly.
And I can show them how to do it and say, hey, it's up to you how you put it up, and that's your gig. Yeah. I'm just going to show you and help you make the content that's going to be compelling. They kind of look at me and go, oh, you can do that? I said, hey, I can show you how to do it without me. And they're going, yeah, but you make it really easy.
This is what people don't understand. And I have this conversation regularly with a colleague at the moment, that, it's not a case of lowering your standards. Yeah. But it's because people like the person I'm talking about is that he used to do TV over here. So whenever I want to do YouTube with him or something, he's like, yeah, but I'm like, no, don't worry about it. The internet is far more forgiving than TV ever was, than radio ever was, But it's not about lowering your standards. It's about making the best of what you've got. So, right now, to talk to you at the moment, I'm using my old Beats headphones. I'm using my wife's laptop, and I've got a GoPro running behind, So I'm using whatever I have at my disposal, because that's all you really need. Yes, of course, if somebody starts sponsoring, you can buy like better kit, better this, better that. But those people that run out and they go, right, I'm going to do a podcast. I better go spend £1,000 first on kit. No. Start the podcast, get some traction, get it running. That stuff can come later. Don't worry about it,
The other side of it is, and it comes right back to where you started, in that passion, and, in Saudi Arabia on that first Honda that your dad owned. If you don't have that passion, that desire, that ability to connect with an audience, to tell your story because you care, no one's going to listen to you anyway. And I think that's where a lot of these folks kind of lose it. Hey, I love marketing people, PR people. Don't get me wrong. I love them, but some of them they can't see the forest for the trees, and they're so busy trying to figure on return on investment. They're forgetting that, hold on a second, just be nice to people and offer them some content. That, I was talking with Bert Oldenmuller in Germany, who does this kind of stuff, and he said return on investment, you can get a 30% gain on return on investment from just being nice. Producing some content that's nice to people can increase your ROI by 30%. And I said, you got stats for that? And he says, absolutely. And I said, really?
But it makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
And like you say, content that's being nice, but content that doesn't have a motive, it doesn't have a marketing purpose, it's not trying to sell you anything. So right now, big up, I'll do it, because one of the ones I didn't mention, that one of the podcasts I'm listening to at the moment is a podcast called Us Lot. And Us Lot, you know.
Yeah, Us Lot.
And it's based on what Colin Chapman, the founder of Lotus, used to call everybody that worked at Lotus. He used to call them Us Lot. It's Us Lot, right?
Yeah.
So what's happened is that one of the PR guys at Lotus, because they've got no activity, nothing's going on, he said, I'll just start a podcast.
There we go.
And he's not, you know, giving you product information. He's not trying to do it. No, he's not. He's just calling up people, journalists and other people that have driven cars or whatever, and he's just doing a podcast and he's just putting it out there. And I'm like, you know what? It's really good. Why not? Why not? You know, there's nothing else you can do, but you can keep your brand awareness out there without actually being, you know, overt about it or blatant about it, but also actually just providing some free, interesting content to people.
Yeah. And that's all people want. They just want to be treated fairly. They don't want to be sitting there listening to you talking and then reaching for their pocket to feel if you've stolen their wallet somehow through the internet. Just honesty. I think when people realize that and they're listening to something and they realize, you know, this is just a great conversation and, you know, away we go. But, you know, the other side, back to what you and I do, is I've even managed, and so you were talking about, you know, how the podcast here at Podaholiks is going, and you know, are we monetizing it, which we haven't. I keep thinking there's got to be, I really should start thinking about that. But anyway, one of the things that we've done is Colin Thomas, who's one of the co-founders and co-owners of We Will Fix It here in Dubai, used to be Jim Will Fix It, and then Jimmy Savile had the issue, so they
we don't talk about that.
Imagine your whole brand. And I've got a great podcast with him talking about the day he woke up to that message, where his whole brand, you know, Jim Will Fix It, suddenly had to be changed because you're not getting any business with that.
God.
And anyway, but it's funny when we talk about the power of a podcast or the power of creating content for an organization. So I do this We Will Fix It podcast. And there's no hiding it that Colin is from We Will Fix It. This is what he does. And we talk about, so there's always a little message about some of the stuff they're doing there and tips and things. And then we just talk about other stuff, fixing stuff, kitchens, backyards, you know, and they put the podcast on their webpage.
I'm so sorry, James. I'm so distracted right now.
Oh, what's going on? You got sunbathers out there?
No, honestly, the world is getting weirder and weirder by the minute. No, it's a beautiful day outside. I live in the middle of London. I live in the northwest London. So this is these are roads, these are streets, these are just busy areas, urban areas.
What's going on?
I heard clippity clop, and I just saw two horses walking past. What is going on?
Are there people on the horses, or are they just random?
Thankfully, there were people on the horses. I just saw two horses walking down my street here. I've never seen that before. We Will Fix It. Sorry for the interruption. I couldn't contain myself. I was like, what am I seeing right now?
So this is back to proof of concept for what you and I do. He can tell me for a fact the benefit that he's had by putting the content that we're generating in the podcast, and I call it the We Will Fix It podcast because that's where they're from, and we fix stuff.
Yeah.
They put it up on their site. They put clips of it up on their site. They put it across their socials, and they get referrals from it, and they get people talking about it, and they're giving something back. And he's saying, it works. He says, I don't even have to tell you it works. It works.
Brilliant.
And you know, and so someone says to me, well, shouldn't you monetize that someone? I said, hey, I don't want to monetize it from this. This is the proof of concept. I'm going to monetize it with the next guy who wants me to do this for them. I'm going to show them how to do it. And I'm going to say, hey, if you got a question, go talk to Colin. He's going to tell you how it worked for him. And away we go. And I think it's great doing these podcasts, and that's why I love doing them, because, for us, we're having a chat, we're catching up, we're bantering back and forth, we're volleying some ideas back and forth. But ultimately, when we start looking at how we make, how you make a living off this, it's a slow burn. It's not fast.
Oh, it is. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is it. I mean, to be honest, it's like 30 years in this business, and I still haven't figured out how to make money. So I'm still trying to figure it out. But you know what? That's because it's constantly changing. It is constantly evolving. And now, of course, we're facing a whole new set of challenges, and there will be a whole new set of solutions that we've just got to figure out. But then that's life, isn't it? You just work it out one step at a time.
So what's on your agenda for the rest of the week in the land of brown car guy? So you got horses outside.
Yeah, I got horses. I think I'm going to be brown horse guy now. I think that's what.
Were they brown?
I think the world has regressed. We've given up with cars. We've given up with transport. We are now going back to horses. That's what's going to happen. So I better start reviewing horses now. That's what I'm going to do. Get my jodhpurs on.
I was listening to Jamie Oliver the other day. I didn't realize all the pubs were closed as well. So you can't even get some good. I mean, of course, it's Ramadan, so you're fasting.
Yeah.
But Ramadan, Eid is knocking on our back door.
Eid is going to be really, really hard. Actually, Ramadan has been difficult. It's been easy in one sense because there's no going out or anything like that,
right.
you know. But it's hard in the sense that, you know, we can't go out and do this stuff. Like my mom is living alone and we can't actually go and see her. So all we can do is talk on the phone. And again, at Eid, normally we would get together, my brother's family, at my mom's place, we'd all get together. But, you know, that's not gonna be possible this year. So it's going to be a bit of a wrench. I mean, I was just saying, I was like, there will be no Eid prayers. That's the first time that I've experienced that. That's incredible, you know.
Wow.
But that's just the reality of the times that we're living in. And, you know, the hope is that if we all just behave ourselves and we just go through these tough times, and we'll get through them. And, and hopefully better stuff awaits at the other side.
I think that's we've got to keep saying that, and people do their part, right, and trying to flatten the curve. That's what everyone's aiming at, flatten the curve. And I keep saying to people, as much as you and I create media, don't listen to the media.
Yes.
You know what? Don't listen to something you're going to enjoy. Don't be listening to all this doom and gloom. And as soon as you start listening to what are they doing in the UK? What are they doing in Dubai? What are they doing in France? What are they doing in Canada? What are they doing? Well, don't even talk about the US. They're drinking Lysol and
oh man, don't go into
malaria tablets. They're eating malaria tablets.
But again, it comes back to what you're saying. It's like, okay, don't listen to the news media over there because you really will go crazy. But then listen to all the parodies and all the comedians and all the people that are making content out of that content. And I think that's where, you get to be entertained. Because at the end of the day, like you say, I mean, and I've touched in a few of my recent videos, I've touched on this with some people that have been involved in mental health stuff like that. And, this is a difficult time for a lot of people. And I think that if you dwell too much on what's going on the reality.
Now, what's going on out on the street there? What am I hearing?
It's the ice cream van.
The ice cream truck.
Seriously. Honestly, it is getting weirder and weirder. It's like now the ice cream. I've just had horses, and now the ice cream van's just gone past.
What time of the day is it there?
So right now it's coming up to 1:35 p.m.
1:35 p.m. and the ice cream truck's going around. Okay.
The ice cream truck has just come out because the sun's out. It's really kind of annoying because we already started a really good summer. It looks like it's going to be a really good summer season. And of course, all the automotive events that I was looking forward to have all been cancelled. Everything is stopped. Nothing is happening. Traveling is going to become a big problem. But the sun's shining. So there we go. I tell you, the ice cream van always puts me in mind of was it Eddie Murphy's first thing that he did, Raw. The stage show that he did, and he does that whole skit on "Mom, the ice cream man's here." Oh man, it's so hilarious. People listening and watching, go and look it up on YouTube. You will crack up. You will just fall about laughing. It's hilarious.
Oh man, Shahzad, I've kept you here for over an hour. This has been a lot of fun.
I know it's been a marathon session, but it's been so wonderful to catch up with you. And, it was always good fun to do. I mean, I guess the reason why we didn't realize we'd done the show on dubaieye for 6 years is because, when you're doing something that you enjoy, it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like it's taking any time. It's just fun. Yeah.
And I think it was all those people. I think I take away from that how many people would call in, because we would get some great callers and we get groupies, but we get the caller. I'm thinking of buying this car for my wife, and and we'd all sit there, and it wasn't televised, so you're almost hitting your head on the desk. And I can remember him, Deshaun. He would put his hand over his head and he'd go say, "But has your wife taken it for a drive? What does your wife want?" Well, she wants this. Well, why are you buying her a Wrangler if she wants a Clio?
Seriously. I mean, you're thinking of buying this for your wife. Do you also drag your wife into the cave by her hair and demand that she feed you? Seriously, dude, what is going on? What century are we in? No, it was always better when the wives would call in. Yeah. That would be better,
Well,
let's face it, the reality is I can't remember the exact statistic right now, but it's a very high proportion. It's like in the 80s or something. Percentage of car buying decisions are actually made by women in the
Oh,
house.
absolutely. Absolutely. No, absolutely. And we had a lot of ladies who used to be listening and calling in.
Yeah,
That was the
yeah,
best
yeah.
part. They were.
I wonder if that woman, you remember that woman, she called us many times and
Yes.
she couldn't make up her mind between the Honda Accord and the Dodge Charger.
Yeah.
I wonder if she eventually made up her mind and bought something, because she was procrastinating for forever, it seemed like.
I think she just liked talking to us.
I think she liked talking to us and taking free test drives, because she kept borrowing the cars, didn't she?
Yeah.
Good on her. Good on her.
Shazad, how can people find you? Because you're across all the media. How can they get in touch with you and follow you? Give us all the links to where
It's very, very easy. Brown Car Guy. If you just Google it, if you look hashtag Brown Car Guy on any of the social media channels, you'll find me. If you Google Brown Car Guy, you'll find me. If you go browncarguy.com, just subscribe for me there. If you go on YouTube, youtube.com/Brown Car Guy, just Brown Car Guy. It's very simple.
Really easy. This has been a lot of fun, Shazad. I got to say, I look forward to just catching up again and just having a chat. But it's like you never left. And I guess you're virtually, I'm sitting here in Dubai looking out and you talk about a crazy day. It looks cloudy. It looks like it's going to rain. How is this possible?
Bizarre.
Yeah.
This is bizarre. In fact, if you'd like, I'll get you a cornetto, because the ice cream van literally has turned up right here now. It's right outside. Oh,
what a crazy world.
Do you want yours with a flake, or?
It sounds like he's right in your house.
He is. He's down here. He's right here. He's just come right here. It's incredible. It's such a crazy day. I suspect the horses are going to be behind them in a minute.
Yeah, in a second. But are people running out to the ice cream truck to get ice creams, or is he,
Normally what happens, and you might hear some banging, because in the balcony, there's a little child that lives in the flat above us, and he's normally in the balcony, and he'll start jumping up and down like crazy. But I don't think the poor kid ever gets any ice cream. He gets really excited about it.
Oh, man. Shazad, this has been an absolute pleasure. Look forward to doing it again. I got to tell you, catching up with you has been spectacular. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, James. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
That went on quite a bit longer than I was anticipating. But just like as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the 6 years that just flew past, well, that hour and whatever it was, 20 minutes or so, that just flew past as well. Because as I mentioned, it's always fascinating as well as fun talking to James, and that was great, just catching up with him and finding out what's going on and just picking his brain on various different things and actually retracing our histories and what we've been up to and stuff like that. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Do let me know what you thought in the comments below and elsewhere. Meanwhile, make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, all the rest of it. And make sure you're subscribing to this channel. Also hit the bell notification icon so you get updates on all the videos as I upload them. And follow me on all the social media channels. Just search for hashtag Brown Car Guy. That's on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Oh, and browncarguy.com, this channel right here. Just go there, subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. Oh, and the other piece of content that I mentioned at the beginning of this video is on patreon.com/Shazad Sheikh, and there you can kindly support me if you enjoyed this video. That'd be greatly appreciated, and if you do, you'll have access to an exclusive piece of content that is my kind of parody sequel to the original Cannonball Run movie. It's a lot of fun. Go check it out. Let me know what you thought of it. It'd be great to see you there. If not, just continue to like, share, subscribe, and all the rest of it. Much appreciated. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.